A new report warns that Singapore and the region could be at risk of severe haze in the coming months. It says hotter and drier weather between August and September could increase the risk of fires in the region. Smoke from the fires could drift into Singapore and affect its air quality. The researchers also say a repeat of severe haze episodes in the past is not inevitable if governments and companies act early to prevent fires from spreading. Claudia Lim reports.
Singapore's air quality reaches an unhealthy range.
In October 2023, Singapore recorded its first unhealthy haze readings in years. Now, researchers have raised the haze risk alert to red, warning that conditions could once again be lining up for a severe haze episode. They point to a possible double whammy. The return of El Nino conditions could bring hotter and drier weather, while a positive Indian Ocean Dipole, another weather phenomenon, could further reduce rainfall in the region. But they say Singaporeans shouldn't panic.
This is an estimate of the conditions to have more fires and the raised risk of more haze. The report isn't for fatalism or pure analysis. It's a call for action. By looking at the weather, but then looking at how companies behave, what governments can do.
While weather is the biggest concern, researchers say the fires driving haze are largely man-made. They can result from land clearing, agricultural burning, or fires spreading across degraded land. Indonesia remains a key focus given its large agricultural sector and the scale of land vulnerable to fires. Amid greater biofuel demand and rising costs, growers could also be tempted to use cheaper land clearing methods.
Rather than spending like $1,000, a few $100 USD to clear land per hectare, you may say, okay, I'll spend a few dollars and I'll use fire. So it'll be much cheaper. So that is the concern that we have, that there'll be less of diligence and more unsustainable activity due to the economic pressures.
Researchers say fire prevention, sustainable land management and early intervention will be critical in the coming months. They are also calling for closer ASEAN cooperation and greater funding for haze prevention efforts.
Singapore has a meteorological center that provides satellite images, really real time, where is the problem. Indonesia under ASEAN has a new center for taking action. So using the information, they can and should take action through their own system. And the Haze Treaty allows for financing to help deal with the problems.
The hope, Mr. Tay adds, is that ASEAN will emerge from this stress test more united and better prepared to tackle haze.
So where do the fires that cause haze usually occur? And how does the smoke make its way to Singapore? Well, hotspots are areas where satellites have detected possible fire activity. For Singapore, the biggest concern is often hotspots in Sumatra and Kalimantan. Fires there have been linked to Singapore's worst haze episodes. When fires erupt in the region, smoke can be carried over long distances by prevailing winds. If those winds blow into Singapore, haze from the fires can affect the country's air quality. The most recent El Nino-related haze episode was in October 2023, when Singapore's PSI climbed to the unhealthy 123 level. The country's most severe haze episode was recorded in 2013, when smoke from fires in Indonesia pushed the PSI to a hazardous high of 401. And for more, Simon Tay, who is chairman of the Singapore Institute of International Affairs, joins us in studio for more analysis. Simon, welcome to the show.
Hi, Angela.
So earlier we heard you say in this report that it was actually a call to action, and it's important not to be too fatalistic about what's being reported. What do you think then are the most important actions both governments and companies should take now to tackle potential severe haze?
Well, I think first is to understand that there is a risk, and it's much more higher risk than it was in previous years when there was relatively wet weather. We are entering the normal dry season, but this dry season will be extremely dry, the meteorologists say. What they've been calling the Godzilla El Nino, a severe El Nino, seems to be really on the cards. And there is a possibility, I wouldn't say more than that, of the Indian Ocean Dipole turning positive. So these two factors, if they interact, it's a real stress test. And while things have improved, I mean, people have been working hard on this issue over the last decade plus. It's like a severe bug going around. Just because you're healthy doesn't mean you can't get the bug.
Well, speaking of the last decade, what do you think is different today, in terms of the risk and also the efforts to tackle those risks compared to a decade ago?
Well, I think ASEAN, our regional group, has played a role, but I think the greater credit must really go to Indonesia. Under previous President Joko Widodo, he really made an effort to say it was a signature. He used to call meetings of the officials and threaten, if you don't do something, the police chiefs get sacked. Now, President Prabowo will face his first test because this is the first time we're having severe haze when he's president. Now, I'm not being pessimistic. He has made some commitments to have more control over the commodities. He has created a new desk to coordinate action and fire response, emergency response. And I think we're coming to the stage where really eyes will be on what is done rather than just what is promised. And I think that's where this call for action, this higher surveillance, I think is very important.
Now, the report also highlights August to September as the peak danger period for severe haze. What should Singaporeans expect in the lead up to that and during that time as well?
Well, that's a good question because we made the release today when it rained the whole day. So we are not saying the El Nino is already, happening now. We're kind of preparing it because there is still time. What is the time for? Now, the big companies in Indonesia have really put budgets, created capacity for firefighting on the spot, preemptively. Some of them have even gone out to villages around their concessions to really give incentives to have fire-free villages. And this is very important because Indonesia is huge, concessions are huge, and once it starts, it's hard to stop. And the government can't be everywhere. Now, having said that, those are the major companies. How about the smaller ones? How about the medium-sized ones? And that's where we hope that Indonesia will start to press. This is against Indonesian law. President Prabowo has threatened to take firm action against errant companies. And that kind of ownership is what we need right now from Indonesia.
Yeah, those economic pressures that you're speaking of, that's really encouraging a lot of people to clear land or companies to clear land by fire. That's cheaper, more immediate in that sense. Are sustainability commitments starting to crack under economic pressure, you think?
Well, I think it's partly the cost, but the other is the opportunity. Some of the crops where you use palm oil particularly has a dual use. It's a food, but it's also fuel, and it can be used for biofuel in Indonesia. They're increasing their content of palm oil in their biodiesel from 40 to 50. And that percentage, it sounds like 10%, is as big as a huge export to a big country like India. So really the stress on supply will increase, and therefore you could increase your plantation and clear land in that cheap way. Now, I don't want to be too alarming because that seems to be stable for the moment. That's a kind of middle-term problem. Right now, really, it is back to basic fire prevention, firefighting, and hopefully the coordination at ASEAN level between the Specialized Meteorological Center in Singapore and the new ASEAN Center for Action and Coordinated Action is in Jakarta. And I hope that will start to work.
Let's zoom in on the regional, kind of collaboration here. We've had regional agreements, we've had frameworks over the years.
Yes.
Why is haze still such a recurring problem for the region?
In fact, we've had more than just frameworks. We have actual treaty, and we have an institution in the body within the treaty to create mechanisms for funding. Partly, international law cooperation among the 10 and now 11 countries always takes time. Secondly, frankly, it must be done in a way where Indonesia feels not pressured. It doesn't feel like it's always being blamed. Indonesia has made tremendous improvements. So we need to cooperate, encourage, and of course, be frank with Indonesia if problems arise, and Indonesia should be frank with us. I think this is how ASEAN can frame and push ahead. But in the end, it's gone down to the ground level, down to the province level. And so, in fact, we're going to take a trip down to Riau to meet the governor, if possible, meet the non-government organizations and meet some of the companies and smallholders.
Hopefully some action can still be taken to prevent severe haze.
Yeah.
Simon, always appreciate your insights. Thank you. That was Simon Tay, Chairman of the Singapore Institute of International Affairs.